I don't get nervous often. It's rare. But every time I've had a conversation with this next guest, it's been one of those rare moments. Not just because he's someone I've looked up to for as long as I can remember, but he's quite literally one of the cornerstones of modern dog training. Michael Ellis needs very little introduction. And if you're even slightly interested in dog training, this is not a conversation you want to miss. So I've got, like I mentioned, a couple of questions prepared. It's from my mentorship group, which are a really nice mix of people in their dog training journey. Some of which are just starting out, some of which are trying to look for a change in career path, and then some of which are established dog trainers that just want to upskill themselves, their knowledge about dog training, their business and so forth. So some of the questions are a little bit, I won't say superficial, but unfortunately things you will have answered 1,000 and a million times. So apologies in advance for that. But
no problem.
Again, if we look at it from our listeners' point of view, I'm sure plenty of people will take a lot out of it. Is that okay?
Totally okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I don't mind at all. I know that's the gig. And those are the people you want to speak to, the people at, earlier in their journey. Those are the voices you want, the people you want to direct your energy to anyway. So,
out of interest, what type of people are coming into your membership?
A wide variety, I assume. I'm paying very much attention, right? So this is part of my weakness in this online world, is that I don't give it a lot of my energy other than putting the content up there. And I don't pay too much attention to demographics or all stuff that I should be paying attention to, right? So
yeah.
I'm going to be 60 this year, and I'm like, what energy I have, I put into the things that I really care about. And so the content, what I'm talking about, I care about, and the other stuff in my life, and getting out and, putting my hands on dogs and that stuff. And so, I don't watch it very much. Like, I don't read any comments and stuff like that. I have no idea. Like, I don't even look at that stuff, to be honest. And so I have a rough idea of how many members we have at any given time, because it pops up on my analytics thing, but I don't really dive deep. But I've made a little bit of a resolution to later this year to start to pay a little more attention to that stuff, just because I'm always uncomfortable with marketing personally, and it's my thing. It's nothing that, it's just my knee-jerk thing that I guess I was raised to like, that it feels like self-promotion and like bragging and stuff like that if you're marketing. And it always just gives me a little bit of a twinge that I have to this day been unable to get completely over, right? And so, but it's doing me a disservice, because if my goal is really to get good dog training information to as many people as possible, then I should start paying attention to that stuff. But the biggest part of my membership, I'm assuming, is our trainers for sure, and people that kind of already knew who I was. I've been doing more stuff on reactivity lately, and so that, of course, is getting lots of eyeballs, because that's something that the general public deals with on a regular time. So I'm assuming we may have some kind of regular dog owners popping in as well a little bit. My content's a little bit hard for pet dog owners, just because I don't have too many things that are just really broken down to the super basics. I'm usually it goes deeper than like maybe the average person wants to go. You have to have a pretty decent interest in dog training to want to go into it. And so part of the plan too is to kind of make a little bit more content for the average dog owner, where I would cut out some of the deeper explanations and the more kind of specific jargon and stuff like that, and make it kind of simple, and have some of that stuff available too. But
the kind of the problem is, like, the great dog trainers that are around us, yourself included, they kind of take away their communication with everyday dog owners, because they naturally graduate into dog sports. And so like they then create a gap, yourself and Ivan, for example, and Pat and so on. They go into dog sports, they go into dog trainer training, but these people, again, yourself included, have such a bank of knowledge that the everyday person could really benefit from. And so, it'd be great to get you guys to be talking about everyday problems a little bit, because if that's where I think that's where the main battle is happening, right? With working with the lay person and the lay dog.
Absolutely.
And so it would be great. And I know your motivation probably over time will diminish, because that's what that's how I started a lot anyway. Before I started doing more sports stuff, a lot of us start at that point, right? And you probably did it for a long time, and the same with a lot of dog trainers start in the pet industry, and then they get bored of it, I think.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like the training itself is not, it's not necessarily boring. It's basic, right, in that sense, and the dogs are not an issue. For me, it's hard to stay motivated, and I've talked about this a little bit in the past. It's hard to stay motivated with people that don't necessarily want to meet you where you are, right? It's a little like working with an unmotivated versus a motivated dog, right? It's kind of the same thing. And so when you're dealing with dog trainers, these are people that have a passion for the activity. So it's not really difficult, even if they have very little talent or very little experience. They want to be there. They want to learn. They want to know more about the subject. So that, as a teacher, feels good and it's fun, in that sense. And when you start dealing with the average companion owner, not that they don't care, it's just, they don't care as deeply. And some people will come to you and they really won't care. They just want their problem solved. And that's a little bit of a struggle for me when you take something you're so passionate about and watch people and you try to help people that don't really care about it, like that just want a result. And so, it's that part that's the hard part for me at this stage of my career anyway. There are stages where you learn to motivate yourself by making a puzzle out of it or a challenge. Can I get this person on board? Can I get them excited about dog training the way I am a little bit? You can do those things to keep yourself going. But if you're routinely every day, day in and day out, dealing with people that are not particularly excited about a subject that is deep in your bones, it's kind of hurtful a little bit. And so you tend to retreat towards the people that are more passionate, and you find those more amongst the trainers community than you do amongst the average dog owner community.
Yeah. You typically get people that are kind of forced to be there, like out of duress, because the dog is just a pain in the backside. And then you do then get outliers, of course, that then want to be there, and they get a little bit of a taste for it, right? And they go, oh, okay, there is more to this than I initially thought. This is pretty fun. And often those people go on to be dog trainers, right?
Absolutely. It's wonderful when that happens. Like every time you get a companion dog client who suddenly gets excited and wants to do some stuff with their dog. And that's super gratifying, right? For sure. And I think a lot of dog trainers kind of need to keep a foot in both worlds, right? So it's important, to your point, like you get further and further removed from the problems of everyday dog owners, right? And it's easy for them because there are things that you don't even think about anymore that are so basic that you forget to tell people about them, right? And when you're dealing with the blank slate of an average pet owner, like you really basic animal husbandry stuff, like the most basic stuff that I learned 40 years ago. And like, it's like unconscious at this point. You're like, oh yeah, you need to explain that too. You need to take everybody down to the very basics. And so there's a little bit of a shift, and it's important, I think, as a teacher to kind of keep in touch with that. So I'm trying to swing back around and think about those problems a little bit more lately, for sure.
I think that leads us very nicely into our questions. Are we okay to start our Q&A? Awesome. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so in terms of dog trainers that are just starting on their career, where do you think their primary focus should go? Day one, week one, where should they be sending their efforts in order to make sure their career is going in the right direction?
So I would think less about their career and more about their craft at the early stages. Focus on good dog training, your personal mechanics, and putting your hands on as many dogs as possible. And don't bog yourself down with whether or not it benefits you as a career choice, like in your job, and it's going to make you money. I think lots of dog trainers get shoved in a direction early in their career because they think that's the direction that's going to help them make money out of it, because it's going to be your job, right? It's going to be your career. And it's really easy to get kind of, instead of mastering your craft, as it were, you start to kind of chase the stuff that you think is going to be most financially viable for you. And that mindset kind of takes you out of the moment and takes you away from your skill building. And so really, to me, it's the physical mechanics of good dog training, because at the end of the day, dog training is a physical discipline. Focus on timing and consistency and kind of learning to understand different dogs. Do whatever you can to touch and work with as many different types of dogs and people as possible, right? And then kind of don't put the cart before the horse. Like, from a business perspective, don't bite off more than you can chew. Make sure you have hands-on real experience with something before you decide to sell it or teach it to somebody, right? In those cases. A lot of dog trainers, I think new dog trainers, wind up gaining their experience on the job with clients in that sense. And I think that can put you in a kind of an uncomfortable position to kind of present yourself as expert before you're ready to be presenting yourself as expert. So for me, really focus on what you perceive to be quality dog training. Put yourself around other trainers that do work that you admire. The work, not their business end of it. Not that that's not going to be essential. It is it's an integral part of it, and you'll need it, but you don't need it first. You need the skills first, craft first, and then that stuff.
I am in total agreement, and I recently did a video on like the 5 pillars of being a successful dog trainer, not necessarily a career. And number 1 was always just be skillful at what you do, and be able to actually solve the problem that someone is looking to be solved. But taking anyone's money before you can do that, I think it then becomes unethical. And I think then beyond that, people working, and I will hold my hands up at this point, but people working within their remit as well. Like when I first started and I was working through basic pet dog training, I think it's always someone's aspiration to start working on the aggression cases and the more severe kind of reactivity cases. And you kind of want to go out and be a world beater, right? And that's just how someone that's generally motivated will probably end up. But quite quickly, I feel it can damage not only your reputation, but your confidence. And of course, you're not going to do a good job and potentially create further problems with the dog, right?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, because the truth is that work is kind of fragile work anyway. Then everybody can make mistakes in that kind of work, right? The more difficult work like that. And if you're a beginner, you're certainly going to make more mistakes, and the cost of your mistakes are much higher in that kind of work, right? Also, I think certainly for me, and I can't speak for everybody, it's a really uncomfortable position to be in, like to be kind of taking someone's money and trying to help them solve a problem that you don't have a deep kind of understanding of, like in your bones kind of understanding. Not like, I heard somebody explain this and I'm just parroting someone else's response to that, right? Yeah. Meaning you've done it, you put your hands on the dogs, you know what it feels like, you've seen it in its iterations, you know what the mistakes look like, you know what it looks like when it goes well. That kind of deep knowledge of a subject makes you comfortable and confident. And that kind of work, even though you can still make mistakes and things don't always go right, it feels good. It feels comfortable. When you're operating outside of that zone, there's always this anxiety. And even if you're good at faking it, it still doesn't feel good inside. It's an really uncomfortable position to be in. and you're less likely to stick with the craft, and to your point, you're more likely to damage your reputation as a result of that. And so build it kind of slowly as your experience builds, because we've talked about this on past podcasts and before, and the idea that there's more information at your fingertips now than at any point ever, right? So new dog trainers can get access to wild amounts of information really easily, right? Without going anywhere, without even leaving your town or your home, right? And so you can get access to good information, but you have to kind of learn to wade through that. But you can't really shortcut the experiential part of it. The hands-on part of it, there is no substitute for just doing it, for touching a lot of dogs and putting a lot of different types of dogs through the process. And that's just the dog part, right? Much less if you're a professional dog trainer, you're a human teacher at the end of the day. Yeah. That's the other piece of the puzzle. So you get good at your craft, and then you have another craft to master as well, which is, hey, what compromises do I make with people that can't do what I can do? And what's a safe compromise? What's a fair to the dog compromise? All those things. And so that's just years of experience. And so when you're in a rush to get to the end part of that experiential world, you're going to put yourself in a lot of uncomfortable and potentially counterproductive positions, for sure.
Yeah, there's so many bumps in the road that can really have a massive knock-on effect to your confidence, and maybe even like past the point of no return in some instances.
Absolutely.
I made a couple of silly mistakes early doors and ended up getting bit on 2 occasions. And on the second occasion, I was probably a very fine margin away from packing it all in and going back to my old job. And this was like a couple of years into actually being a dog trainer as well. But it was a immaturity on my behalf, thinking I could deal with something that I'd not dealt with before. And I had a bit of like momentum of helping people, and this false sense of confidence. And yeah, there's a very fine line between learning a very hard lesson and going past the point of no return and almost like trauma, right? And yeah.
Okay.
That's
well,
brilliant.
I'm glad you got through it and stuck around.
Yeah, I'm glad too. I wouldn't change much, but I'm trying to talk about my errors more recently. For the sake of, because if you kind of, especially on social media and stuff like that, you want to be, I think we all have an internal urge to be a prophet and can do no wrong, because we're so scared of criticism from online and things like that. But there are some lessons that I learned the hard way, and hands up mistakes that I learned that I think people hearing them could potentially avoid them. And so yeah, that's definitely a massive one, working within your remit, especially early doors when your confidence is very fragile. And like you said, once you start taking on those cases that you in your heart of hearts know that you haven't got the capability, then you lie to yourself. And then once you've lied to yourself, then then you've got major problems.
It's a slippery slope for sure. And to your point, exactly, for me, the mistakes are as important as the successes. And showing people, and nobody, doesn't matter how long you're doing it, how skilled you are, how gifted you are, everything goes perfectly. It just doesn't. You're dealing with like live creatures. It does not go well. Nobody has that. So everybody's going to make mistakes, and we need to acknowledge that. And the people that are the best at this, that have the biggest reputations, have to be willing to show their mistakes, right? And talk about their mistakes. It's a part of my mission right now, in the sense, like part of my Snug Chronicles, my video training journal with my young dog right now is all of the entirety of all the videos. And it may be tedious for somebody that's not really interested in the depths of dog training, because I'm not cutting out anything. Like, I'm not editing them at all. And so what I'm doing before a session, in the session, all the mistakes, all the shit that went wrong at that spot. And then afterwards, I'm talking over it and talking about that. And I think it's easier for somebody that's established to do that. So it's certainly on us, the people that are more successful, to do it. In the beginning, gosh, that's going to be really hard for somebody. They're just trying to gain their confidence, and putting that out there is not that they shouldn't. I think they should know that it's fine to show your mistakes. It's fine you're going to make them. So, and everybody else is too. But I think the people that have kind of more established reputations need to do more of this, right? Need to do more of talk about the stuff that went horribly wrong for them, talk about the mistakes they've made, and show their mistakes in their training too. Like, oops, I shouldn't have, that was a bad choice on my part. I shouldn't have done that. Now I'm going to have to come around to this, and this is why. And you help people navigate that. There's an educational opportunity, but also it lets everybody know what the process really is. It's a combination of getting better at things and making fewer mistakes and different mistakes, but you're never free of them. So, and that's liberating on some level for people. It allows them to relax into the work and kind of really mess around and feel it. And that's how you get mastery of a subject. Yeah.
I think it's relatable too, right? Because if when you go and put out content that's just perfect, that everything looked like it went perfectly right, you then demotivate people because of like, well, I'm not perfect. And so if I only ever saw perfection, I'd be like, well, I'm so far away from that. It's not within my grasp. And there's a somewhat of a toxic trend in the dog training industry, whereby if someone has visited another dog trainer and hasn't done a great job for whatever reason that was, maybe it wasn't a good fit, maybe the owner, dog trainer, like their relationship wasn't great, or there could be a million and one reasons, right? They go to the new dog trainer, and the new dog trainer then calls out the dog trainer and said, hey, look, they couldn't fix this. Let me show you how it's done, which I find quite remarkable. And the anecdote I often give people is the New Zealand rugby team, out of all the teams in history, I think I might be wrong on this in that they might just be trumped by the USA female soccer team, but I'll have to be fact checked on this.
Okay.
But regardless, they have something like an 80 to 85% success rate in terms of wins, right? And that is the most successful sports team of all time in the history, right? And they're still losing 15% of their games, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So if we think we're going to be successful with 100% of dogs, it's an insane concept to think we can be successful with 100% of dogs.
Absolutely. And you touched on something in there that I think is really important, which is not vilifying other trainers to elevate yourself. There's a difference between us as a community calling out what bad dog training is, right? So we have our little discussions about the current politics and cultural battles about methodology and dog training. And for people that are interested in real, true balanced training, what's best for the dog in the end, it's important that we kind of police our own in a sense of calling out what is bad or abusive dog training, because it's out there. Like, we can't bury our head in the sand, and we need to police our own ranks. But that's very different than you have a client that came to you from another trainer and you try to make yourself look good at the expense of the other trainer and talking about that. I want the information that comes from that other, what that other person did with the dog, because that may help me make adjustments to what the dog really needs. But I can do that without casting aspersions on the other person to elevate myself. And I think that's really important, right?
Yeah, I think it's just a really easy way to try and bring yourself up. And as dog trainers, we all know, and I tell this story all the time, early on in my career, if someone had been to 4-5 dog trainers, I'd be like, right, I'm going to be the dog trainer that's going to fix this. I'm going to be the man, that I'm going to be the one, right? And that previous me would have saw that as a opportunity to prove everyone wrong and prove how great I am, and so on and so forth. And I'll make 2 points on this. The first point would be, now it's just a red flag that someone's been through 5 dog trainers.
Yes, it is.
And they're still kind of struggling. And the second thing would be, there's so much more that goes into a case than just a dog trainer's skill set with a dog, right? From everything from maybe communication skills, from the demographic that they fit into, like how they speak to people, how they carry themselves, and there's logistical things in there as well, the breed of dog experience and so on and so forth. And so I just had a recent, like a friend of mine reach out, and he trained this dog and he did a really great job with the dog, right? And the owners, they took the dog back. It was like a foster to adopt thing, and he saw them a month later like go into another dog trainer, and they said on their social media, hey, we've tried so and so, it didn't work out, he can't do a good job. And I said, listen mate, there's 1,000,001 reasons why they might have gone to another dog trainer. They could have been closer, they could have been cheaper. Like, don't get caught up about it, right? It's all part of the journey. There will be dogs that we've probably worked with in the last year that might have gone on to train somewhere else, and that's fine. That doesn't mean we did a shitty job. That didn't mean we didn't put enough effort in, so on and so forth. And for dog trainers out there that are in the juvenile stages of their career, like, it'll happen to them as well, right?
Yeah, very well said. That is all absolutely true. It's a complicated situation. It's not just the dog training, especially when you're helping people with dog training. You could do super work, and in all the things that you illustrated are exactly right. They can fail or they can choose to go somewhere else for a wide variety of reasons. It could be just personality too. Like, sometimes your style and their style doesn't connect in a certain level, and you can't, like, disconnecting from taking that stuff on is going to be really important. And it's harder today because people are going online and saying stuff like this. So they're commenting on social media and things like that. I have had a number of discussions recently. We talked about it a little bit before we started today, is that I literally don't look at what people say about me. Like, I don't look at the good stuff people say about me, and I don't look at the bad stuff that people say about me. Right. I think it's a little bit of a trap. Both of the ways it's a trap. Yeah. One makes you feel like you're better than you are, that you're maybe better than other people in a sense, in a way that you might not be. It can inflate your ego in a way that can be unproductive. And the other way is you're going to take on a lot of stuff that's not your control. There's a quote, it floats around the internet sometimes, and it's attributed to Anthony Hopkins, the actor. And I don't know if it's true. But it says, I don't know whether it's really his, but it says something like, other people's opinion of me is none of my business, or what other people say about me is none of my business. Right. And I think that's really important. If you focus on doing your work right and you do that and don't take that stuff on, you'll be better. You'll have a better career. It'll be easier to last, and you'll stop kind of second guessing work that is potentially good work. And because there's no chance, and it'll start to take up huge amounts of your energy, that now you're constantly concerned with what people are saying about you, and you think you need to respond. And suddenly you're no longer helping people and their dogs. You're defending yourself in a way that's totally unnecessary and frequently looks defensive, to be truthful. Like, if you're just like, hey, head down, hey, great, you jibed with somebody else, good for you, excellent. And you can know in your heart of hearts, if you did good work, then you probably did improve their situation, and maybe you made it easier for the next person. So all of that's in there. Yeah.
I have a rule whereby I'll never reply to someone unless I have something really witty to say back. if I don't, I just...
You have a lot of those.
You said something really interesting then, where you shouldn't concentrate on the good stuff or the bad stuff. And you give the reason that it can inflate egos. And I totally agree. But I also agree on a second level, whereby I believe that if you read positive comments, and you read 100 positive comments, and they are to you, they are all valid, and you take them as they are positive, and they do have an inflation on your ego. Well, if the positive are valid, if they're from strangers, then all you do is also valid the negative. Because if the positive's important, then why is the negative not? Because they're both sets of strangers. And so I do make a conscious effort not to take on board. And me and my girlfriend we'll joke about it. Like we kind of like break the fourth wall and we laugh about it. Like it's not real life. It's not real life. And there could be a post that gets like 500 comments and 95 are positive. 5% are just like arms up in the air, absolutely infuriated by whatever I've said, right?
Yes.
But if you take on the 95, you have to take on the 5. And that will break you.
Point.
And if you do have 95 positive comments, then by proxy you will have at least around 5% negative. Because if you've said something that someone loves, you will have also said something that someone hates because of people comment on polarity, right?
Yeah.
Guys, I'm so sorry to interrupt the show, but I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the events we are running in California in the USA in the month of July. On the 14th to the 17th of July, I'll be running a no-holds-barred reactivity workshop. This is a 4-day event where we'll be working in real time with some real reactive dogs and showing you the systems and protocols I put in place to generate the amazing results here we have at the Yorkshire Canine Academy. You can book a working slot or you can book a spectator slot if you just want to come and watch and see what's going on. And then on the weekend, the 20th and 21st, I am visiting the prestigious Michael Ellis School to deliver an event on sales and marketing and everything business for dog trainers, showing how we grew our following to over 400,000 followers in 18 months just on Instagram, how we gained 50,000 subscribers on YouTube in record time, how we grew our mailing list to 30,000 people, how we grew our team to over 15 members of staff in just less than a year, and how we quite literally 10 times the size of our business just by implementing some small changes. So I'd love for you to join me. If you do want to come along, hit the link in the description and grab yourself a ticket. See you there.
People are more comfortable saying nice things about people than not nice things about people, right? And so for the 5% that posted that, there are other people out there that didn't like what you said, right? Yeah. They just aren't the type of person that's willing to say it publicly, right? And so they have some manners, or they're thinking like, oh, well, but I didn't resonate with them. And that's just the truth of the matter. And part of what you're doing is, if you concentrate on your work and being authentic, like, this is me, this is how I am in the world, and I'm going to treat people a certain way, and I'm going to train the way that I think is the right way. And you're doing that, you will find the people that you resonate with, and the people that you don't resonate with, that's fine. There's somebody else out there that will. And my job isn't to make everybody like me or be everybody's source of information. You want to find the people that are kind of primed to receive your message and be able to make use of it, right? And if you even if you just personality wise rub somebody the wrong way, they won't be able to hear you in the same way as somebody that kind of you connect with. And that's just a part of the process. And this idea that this because somebody over there doesn't like me or somebody over there does like me, it has anything to do with my skill set. It really doesn't. And so at some point, focus on the work.
I don't think it's to say that we shouldn't take critique from people, but who we take the critique from is really important, right? And
absolutely.
That quote whereby someone says that if you wouldn't take advice from someone, then don't take criticism from them, right?
Yep.
And I think that's really important too. We shouldn't ignore everything, because if there are going to be ones that people that we respect, and let's say you turned around to me and said, someone that I've asked for advice on plenty of occasions, if you turned around to me and said, hey, you're wrong on this, or you're out of line, then of course I'd have to turn around and be like, well, you've given me plenty of examples of showing me what's right. I feel obliged to listen to maybe what's wrong, right? Yeah. And that goes for the ones that are also closest to us, and we shouldn't bury our head in the sand. But if you're looking at someone and they're there on their profile, they've got no profile picture, they've got no name, and they're slandering you, they're slating you, and so on and so forth. Not in a million years would you ask them for advice. They're not going to put bread on your table, and they're most certainly not going to speak at your funeral. So the chances are you probably don't need to worry about that criticism, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I think from the people you respect, you should try to cultivate an atmosphere in which they're comfortable telling you those things, right? So the people that I care about, their opinions, the people that I have respect for and admire in the training world, those people, I want their opinions. I want their unvarnished opinions. I'm going to ask for them, and I'm going to try to create an atmosphere in our interactions that allows them to comfortably tell me what they think without feeling judged or without feeling like they're going to hurt my feelings or any of that kind of stuff. Because that is true. You want to take on, there's certainly helpful criticism, and we should all be seeking that from the people that we respect. Right. So I think that's a great point.
Shall we move on to the next question?
Sure.
Seems like a good point. Cool. I like this question. Do you think it's necessary for a dog trainer that is training pet dogs to get into sport dog training?
It is not necessary, but it is, it will benefit your growth, right? So for a couple of different reasons. One, that world is constantly trying to innovate. So in a way that, not that pet dog owners aren't trying to innovate, not that pet dog trainers are trying to innovate and that kind of thing, but in that world, it's kind of the basis for it. Like, you're trying to get better at this. You're trying to find a new and better way to do everything. And so you will be exposed to kind of the cutting edge of ideas around dog training are typically happening in those worlds, right? Where the people are going to put it out there in front of people, and innovation moves you ahead of the next person in competition. So there's always a kind of pressure to get better. You also, a lot of very gifted trainers play in that arena, in those arenas. So you can now form relationships with those people and help them. They are super useful in furthering your educational journey. Like, I can't tell you how many other sport trainers that I've been around over the years that you pick up all kinds of good stuff from, right? And again, in the pure pet dog world, I'll do a little tangent here right now, because I'm encouraging pet dog trainers in the States. This is a recent thing that I've started to kind of put out there, to form clubs the way we do as sport dog trainers, right? Where pet dog trainers in an area get together and train together and kind of help each other out in a sense and bounce ideas off each other and that kind of thing. And because it's everybody's business in the pet dog world, people can get kind of insular, and they're not engaging with other trainers in the same way, and they're not helping each other out in the same way. And that's one of the things that is active in the sport world, right? That's there. And then it also makes you have to be precise, right? And so I think it's easier to be very precise and then deliberately relax criteria when it's not necessary than it is to be kind of relaxed or that's good enough in your criteria. Like, if that's the way you come into dog training, like, I just need to do the minimum necessary to get this dog to be acceptable for that person, right? Then it's harder to shift gears from that, becoming very detail oriented. But if you're detail oriented, it's relatively easy at a certain point to go, oh, well, that's not necessary here. I can let that go. And it takes time and energy to cultivate that kind of detail. So I think it's a huge benefit to any trainer's education to play around in that world, right? But it's not necessary. I know many very good, gifted dog trainers that aren't into competition. They don't compete, and they still do great work. And in the pet dog world, I think probably as much of your success is going to be governed by how good you are with people and how good a teacher you are and that kind of thing than the actual quality of your dog training, meaning you've got more margin for error there in terms of the precision of your training. But that being said, I think I would encourage trainers to at least dip their toe in the water. It'll help you on your journey. And if it's not your jam, it's not your jam. So not necessary, but a good thing, I think.
I think it's sometimes hard to make these points without sounding like to undermine pet dog and pet dog training. However, what I would say, and I totally agree with everything you said, we're almost working with exaggerated versions of dogs, aren't we? And the everyday pet problems they're having, as well as, should I say, exaggerated versions of the exercises we might do with pet dogs, in terms of the call off is a recall.
It is. It's a very challenging recall, and it's a recall that you have to do carefully, because you care that the dog maintains interest in the thing you're calling them off of. Right. This is different. Like, so if my dog likes to chase cars or chase deer, and I proof off my recall and I get a good recall, and the dog's not interested in chasing deer anymore, cool, no problem for me that in that world. But now you have to be very careful about how you construct it. And by doing that, you learn all the places it can go wrong. You learn all the places your dog can maybe take on a lesson you didn't want them to take on, because you have to maintain their interest in the decoy. At the same time, you need to get very high levels of control of them. And so that's a more challenging training problem. And it requires that you be more step by step, more incremental. You break it down, and you're smart about paying attention to the steps. And so you're exactly right. They're exaggerated versions of all of those things. And you're dealing with reactivity a lot these days, like anybody else is. Like it's half of the questions you get are around this world. And I can't tell you how much I learned from the world of protection sports about what drives reactivity and what motivates dogs, and how to manipulate dogs when they're aroused and they're getting overexcited and getting angry and aggressive and feeling defensive, all those things. It's a kind of controlled laboratory for getting to be able to read dogs and feel those things. So I think you're exactly right. There are lessons there that apply directly, even though it doesn't necessarily feel like it in the time. And if you look at them, they look like very different things, but there are skills that will come out of that for you.
I can't speak for everyone, but personally, observing sport dog training, I felt almost compelled to have to partake as a dog trainer, because of what I was seeing there was just way beyond anything I could get a dog to do or not do, right? And seeing it, especially in real life, sometimes the videos don't quite do it justice when you're experiencing the dogs like switching in and out of aggression firsthand is like quite an incredible thing to see. And I wasn't in love with sports per se, but I was in love with the craft of dog training. And for me, naturally looking at the industry and the full picture, it felt like a very natural progression to look into dog sports, because of everything that dog sports is broken down to was what I was doing at the same time, but just almost like on steroids. And so through the process, by all means, I've fallen in love with dog sports and working with my dog and working through problems with my dog, in which you've very kindly helped me out with in the past. But from where I was in my career, it felt like I almost didn't have a choice if I wanted to be where I wanted to be as a dog trainer, which I'm still not there, but where I want to be. It's felt like a natural progression, because that's where I was seeing the dogs worked at truly the highest level. Because for me, it's the only sport that we're really, besides genuine work, we're really playing with aggression, right, and bringing the dog in and out of aggression, where other sports aren't doing that. Yeah,
and you're exactly right. I can remember so clearly as a teenager when I was first exposed to dog sport outside of kennel club type obedience kind of thing. And it was I was a teenager, and it was a police and Schutzhund demo at a dog show that I was a confirmation dog show, and they had the demo that was at the fairgrounds where it was happening, and I was just completely blown away. Like, it just completely rearranges your brain about what's possible with dogs. I had nothing on my radar that made me think that that's what dogs were capable of doing. And the whole thing was just like, whoa, okay, I got to find out about that. right?
Yeah.
And this is a long time ago. So the work isn't nearly as refined as it is now. And our understanding isn't there. But even then it was just, whoa, oh my God, I got to know about that. Right. And so I feel that, like, I was into dogs already. I was doing things with dogs, but it felt like a leap in what your understanding of what might be possible with dogs, which I think is highly motivating, makes you really want to dig in and better yourself. And, like, to your point, that you're on your path to the dog trainer that you want to be, which, by the way, you'll never get there, right? Because whenever you get where you are, there's another place that you want to be, right? So you're going to be chasing that for the rest of your life, right? Which is kind of wonderful.
That's okay. That's the point.
Yeah, it's the best, right? That's why you can do this for a lifetime, right? Because you're never going to be done. You're not going to be fully baked. But yeah, that idea that it kind of motivates you to learn more about, if that's possible, what else is possible, and then really getting, if you have any interest in dealing with aggression and things like that, it's also a way in which you get to manipulate that work in a controlled environment. You get to control it, and you get to get comfortable around it. Like, I think for the average dog trainer, when dogs start to get aggressive or get highly aroused, it's an uncomfortable feeling, right? You're just like, oh gosh, you're adrenalized, they're adrenalized. Like, how do I do this? And like, oh gosh, in that process. And I think what winds up happening is, when you're around that work, you start to relax into it. And that's when you start to actually be able to see stuff. In the beginning, you only see the big stuff, because it's you were as worked up as the dog is, because that's hard to stay cool in those situations. And what that allows you to do, suddenly you're like, okay, I'm getting used to this. I'm relaxing. Now I get to see little details. And it teaches you to stay calm in these situations and kind of keep your cool. There's a lot of skills there that you get to explore and develop that will serve you in other places, right? When two dogs get in a dog fight, for instance, right? So, like, you got to keep your cool. It's not a whole bunch of screaming and yelling and freaking out. Like, you got to stay calm and do your thing. And part of my work in the world of protection makes that easier for you, right, in a sense. Right?
Mm-hmm. And you can see that in people when they maybe first go and visit a club, or what my mum come to visit recently, and she was like hanging around, and she witnessed club, and she was like taken aback by these dogs being put in and out of aggression. Right. And then when it happens in your everyday job, and you see a dog light up with their reactivity and their flashing teeth, you're just like, it's a Wednesday night and a Sunday night for us. That's just,
exactly right.
And you habituate to it, right?
Yep. No, I was just saying, we had Forrest, Mickey, and I just did a couple of reactivity workshops kind of back to back. We had a week off in between them, and we could kind of a deep dive, and we really made the week about focusing on the mechanics of handling dogs around these situations, because I think there's a deficit in the basic handling skills of lots of dog trainers, but certainly dog owners and stuff when they're dealing with reactivity. Just how to handle the leash, how to move your body, all the basic mechanical skills of that. And what wound up being the hardest part for people is when the dogs reacted, staying calm and methodical about how they were moving through that work, right? Mm-hmm. They were meeting the dog's energy all the time. And so it allowed us to kind of talk about the feedback loop between those things, right? So when the dog would erupt, I would say, hey, you got to let the dog know that's inappropriate, but you don't meet their energy when you do that. You're not going like, no, and panicking and moving really fast and running and all this kind of stuff that your body wants to do in that moment. And how do you get to the point where you stay calm when there's all this energy? Well, for me, certainly the world of protection sports taught me those skills. And then it's easy to apply them. The dog reacts. You're like, nope, we're not doing that. Come on, this way, we're doing this. And your communication's clear. You're not muddling your signals, and you're not throwing oil on the fire with your energetic, right? And the only way you can do that is practice and finding safe ways to kind of practice those skills until they become yours as well. And I think the sport world and the protection sport world is one of the places that allows that to happen.
I think there's similarities between that and like martial arts, right? And so,
oh yeah,
exposed to adrenaline and a confrontational situation in real life, and if you've been exposed to that enough times, you're better equipped to deal with it.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
And I'll make a last point on that as well. I personally have a massive insecurity about being known as an influencer, and so some people will comment on stuff, and this is a me problem, not other people problem. And as kind of our platform has grown and so on and so forth, that's the very last thing I want. And competing with my dog and going onto the trial field is my way of escaping being labeled as an influencer, because of, we can fake things on social media by all means. Anyone can fake something on social media, right? But going onto the trial field with your dog, your personal dog that you've trained, and having the tool stripped and rewards taken away and working the dog at a very high level, that's something that can't be faked. And so it's for me, whether rightly or wrongly, and I'm fully aware it's like a personal insecurity. It's my way of keeping my real dog trainer card, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. I would share your insecurity about that. Like if I thought that somebody was perceiving me as an influencer, I after our long discussion about not taking on what other people think about you, I would.
It's a battle between me and me. It's me and me.
Me and me. I would struggle mightily with that, right? Because you, that's not how you perceive yourself, and there's a knee-jerk reaction to say that I wouldn't want to be perceived that way by the world too. And so I think that you're absolutely right. And it's a way, like, hey, here it is. I'm putting it out there. You can see it. Like everything you're doing. That's the other thing, is your work's going to be judged in a controlled setting, and you have to be able to show that what you do is effective and it works, right? The other thing that I think that comes from it is a willingness to fail in front of people.
Yeah.
So a lot of dog trainers that I know now coming up that have some skills, right? And they're professional and they're entering the sport world, they're really not trialing. They go years and years and years and years without actually trialing. And now they've built it up to a thing where they have a group of people that consider them expert. And if they went out there and they didn't do well, would it negatively impact their business? And they're worried about that. And that starts their growth as trainers. One of the things is, before I ever cared about making it a business, I fell flat on my face in competitions, right? I've failed many a competition, right? I've had successes and I've had failures. And once that's happened, you're like, it happens. It's going to happen to everybody. It doesn't matter how good you are. Like, you are going to fail on a given day at some point, especially if you play a sport like PSA or Mondia Ring, right? With really changing environments and stuff. You can do a good job and still fail, right? And so in those circumstances, there's something liberating about that. And it allows you to say, like, hey, I can get out in front of people and show you what I'm doing, and recognize that no matter how successful you are, that's a part of the process. So don't get in your head about it. Because as soon as you get in your head about not showing, it's the same as showing your mistakes, right? It's the same basic mindset. It will stunt your growth, because you can't push forward through that. And you start to think too much about what other people are going to think about you if you don't do well. And is it going to negatively impact my business, instead of just doing the work, right? And so I think competition is great for that as well. Like, it's a way of kind of proving to yourself that what you're doing is valid and works, right? Because it's all theoretical up until the point where you demonstrate that it actually works, right, out there. And so that's important, but also it's important to recognize that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's how you grow. What did I do wrong? Why didn't it work? Is there something that I can make better? All that moves your growth forward as a trainer.
I read a book recently whereby it said failure is knowledge, and knowledge then equals improvement. And you have to fail to improve, right?
Yeah, 100%. Errorless learning does not exist.
Exactly. We both know that. Okay, should we move on to the next question, Michael?
Sure.
Just a quick one, really, because I get asked this question all the time, and I'm just going to ask for three, either very low cost or free resources for people that are just starting to understand dogs, maybe on a deeper level, beyond the superficial level. If you got gun to your head, you had that question, what would you say?
3 simple resources. So there's a couple of ways. I'd want to think about this from a practical perspective, like the mechanical parts of dog training, and versus a kind of intellectual part of it, right? And so, for instance, there's a very inexpensive book that I still recommend to people called Accelerated Learning by Pamela Reed. And Pam's book is a little paperback. It's 20 years old now or whatever, but she's discussing learning theory, basically explaining operant and classical conditioning and kind of a lot of the basic terminology around behavior stuff. So most dog trainers, once you get past the very beginning stages of that work, you get interested in kind of understanding how and why things work, a little bit of that part of it. And it's a super readable, easy to digest book. And she does a great job of explaining sciencey concepts in a way that's easy to take on and with actual dog training examples connected to it. And it's a, $12 book or $15 book or something like that. So that's a great resource, right? These days, I think probably the best thing is trainers that you respect and things like that increasingly have short tutorials on YouTube and stuff like that that are free too. So I would recommend that people get out and see, kind of find out what trainers you connect with that you inspire you, and look for their free content in the beginning or their inexpensive content. And there may be more that may lead you into the stuff that you want to maybe invest more of your resources into as you go forward. But that's a great way. That's one of in my mind, the benefits of social media. Everyone hears me railing against social media nonstop, like the old guy, get off my lawn, right? Kind of thing. But, but that is super useful. There are a lot of highly skilled trainers that are putting out free content around basic training concepts that I think is super useful. And it'll also help you kind of determine how to spend your other resources in those sets. And then the other thing is find clubs in your area. Dog training clubs are a hotbed of information potentially for you. And as far as the cost of dog training stuff, they're really inexpensive. And although they're going to be focused on some sport, whether it's competitive obedience or agility or protection sports or the tracking or SAR clubs or whatever your interests are to some degree, there's still a lot of skilled dog trainers there who you can develop relationships with and ask questions and learn by watching and that kind of stuff. And that in a hands-on way, that's generally speaking kind of the best way to get around highly skilled dog trainers without spending a small fortune, right? Because though clubs will have a certain cost, it's not super high. Yeah. And also you can gain that if you're willing to go to a dog club and show up and help and work and stuff like that, not so much like, hey, what can I get from you guys? Then people start to respect you and trust you, and that allows you to get access to people's time that would normally cost you a lot of money to get access to.
Yeah. Banking goodwill.
Yeah, exactly right.
Awesome. This next question is a great question, and I'm also very curious. When we first start our careers as a dog trainer, for you, that's way before I think I was born. In all respects,
absolutely, 100%. Fine, I've accepted it.
We get epiphany moments left, right, and center, right? Early doors, and then as we progress through our career, each month, each year, we get less and less epiphany moments as we're exposed to information, right? And the further along in our career we go, we almost cherish those epiphany moments, the rarer they are. So the question is, have you had any epiphany moments in the last year of your career?
That's a really good question. Yes. So I recently had an epiphany that it's maybe more than a year now, but it's taking shape in my head in the last year, especially, is that I think I've had a kind of misunderstanding of the importance of Pavlovian conditioning in dog training. I oversimplified its role, and I didn't understand it as deeply. I oversimplified it a lot. It's much more complex than I thought it was, and it informs virtually everything we do. And I also had a little bit of misunderstanding of negative reinforcement and punishment as being separate things. And hanging around with kind of people that are in touch with the current science on this stuff, they don't really talk about that. That's a kind of an antiquated idea that they're separate processes. They're intertwined. And what I mean by this is that when I'm applying negative reinforcement, there are punishing qualities there and there are reinforcing qualities. And when we try to tease them out like they're separate things, right? So if I ask a dog to do something and they don't do it, right, and I compel them to do it with negative reinforcement in some fashion, I am not only, there are punishing qualities, punishing the fact that you didn't do something that you were prompted to do, but also there's components where I'm reinforcing the behavior that I want through negative reinforcement. And so the kind of epiphany for me is that I've separated all these things a little bit in how I talk about them to people. Like the quadrants are separate, that classical or Pavlovian conditioning is separate from operant conditioning. And I don't really look at it that way. I look at it now like as one big mesh, and they're all kind of at play all the time in subtler ways, right? And I think, I think lots of people that do anything for a long time, there's a deliberate simplification of certain ideas when you're trying to transfer them to people, right? And so when you're teaching people about dog training, you can't talk about all the complexities right off the bat. Like you'll just overwhelm them. There's no place to put that information. Doesn't mean anything to them. And so you make simplified versions of those things, and those can become, that's necessary part of being a teacher, but it also can oversimplify your worldview at a certain point where you get stuck on an idea. And so lately, I've kind of re-embraced the complexity of all those interactions, and especially the role of Pavlovian conditioning. Like it's more important than we give it credit for by a mile, right? And it's more complicated than, I used to think it was just kind of reflexive, involuntary stuff, but it's not. It's everything to do with anticipation. It's everything to do with like repetition and dogs being able to or animals or humans being able to predict what's coming next. And it's a subject that I'm sort of obsessed with now, right? Because the processes that it drives aren't conscious to the dog or the human, and they're happening. And I've focused on the involuntary aspects of that in the past, but certainly in the, like, it's deeper than I thought it was. And as a result, it set me questioning, in my mind, really long settled questions that for me, that I had stopped thinking about. Like I thought I knew this. I thought I understood this. And then I go, oh, wait, maybe, oh, no, it's a lot more complicated than I thought it was, right? So, yeah. It reminded me maybe to take a look at other things that were settled in my head. So maybe that's the epiphany too that comes from it a little bit. Other, what I would consider settled questions in my dog trainer's mind, now maybe they're not so settled, right?
We can question our beliefs, except for the ones we truly believe in.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And there's a this is an obscure reference, but there's a movie called My Dinner with Andre, and people will recognize one of the two actors in the movie. The whole movie is these two guys having dinner together, right? And they're old friends, and they're both theater makers, right? So they're director and writer, and the two people are Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory. And most people know Wallace Shawn because he's most people don't know he's an incredible playwright and wrote a lot of unusual avant-garde plays, but they know him from like Princess Bride. He's the inconceivable guy from Princess Bride, little bald guy, yeah. Or a bunch of other movies and things like that, right? So he's one of the characters, and the other is a famous avant-garde theater director named Andre Gregory, and they're having dinner, right? And the whole movie is just them talking about their lives. They're catching up, right? And Andre Gregory's in his late 50s, early 60s, and there's a scene in there where he talks about kind of questioning everything he's done up to that point. Like he's a super successful director, like, and he talks about like, I don't know that I'm suitable to teach people anymore, right? Like, I don't know anything. I thought I knew all this shit and I don't know anything. Like it's, and that just reminds me of that, like some of the stuff that's happened to me recently kind of put me in that mindset. Things that I was confident about and certain of, you start to realize how complex the world is and how interesting it is in that sense. And it's easy to go like, what else do I think I know that maybe I don't know? And that can be either kind of paralyzing to you in a way, like, oh gosh, and erode your confidence, or it can be exciting. And so for me now, it's kind of exciting to go back and revisit ideas in training maybe that I had stopped thinking about because I just said, oh, this is the way it is. I figured this out already, so I don't have to spend a lot of energy on this anymore. And it's exciting to go back and look at those again and say, is it really what I thought it was? And is there ways that I can make that better still? And so it's motivating to me, at least at this point. A little unsettling when you start to go like, oh man, here's something that I've been talking about for 20 years or 30 years or like that. And maybe I didn't know it as well as I know it.
I recently read about a study whereby people that were told to reframe and were given the rationale as to why their anxiety was actually excitement had then a legitimate physical response in reducing the symptoms of anxiety in terms of they sweated less and so on and so forth. So you're only excited, Michael. You're not anxious. It's not unsettled.
I'm excited. Hell yeah.
A friend, a gentleman that's now become a friend of mine, his name's Simon Moody. He's called the Mutt Nut. He was a force-free dog trainer and a big advocate for it, and almost like the poster boy of the movement here in the UK for a little while. And I rang him one day and I said, "Hey man, I would love to get you on the podcast. Let's talk about things." And he actually at the time was having second thoughts about the information he was exposed to, and I invited him to the club. And he went through a little bit of that process, or so he says, of he saw me with my dogs and how I interacted with my dogs and how I treated my dogs and what I was letting them do, not what I wasn't letting them do. Right. And in that moment, he had an epiphany moment and was going, oh, this isn't what I was told this was like. I was told you guys were just dogs on place beds 24/7 and dogs not allowed to show any affection or anything like that. And in that moment, I think that unsettled him in a way that the information he was exposed to perhaps wasn't what it was. And now, his career, his profession is very different to what it was. He's now got into sport work here. He's learning helper work and so on and so forth. But it was just that one moment and he said this, he told me himself, it was me interacting with my personal dog was very different to how he'd been told that certain trainers interact with dogs. And from there, it spiraled into finding out more.
Yeah. Kudos to him for taking that on. Like, that is something that is unfortunately uncommon and something that I would love to see happen. Like,
any opportunity that I get to have conversations with people with like an opposing viewpoint within the training community, to me is it's an opportunity, because things like that can happen where people can begin to see aspects of the other side. And even if you don't change someone's mind completely, you have the opportunity to just plant a seed of thinking about something from somebody else from a different perspective. And the fact that he was open to that enough to come and do that and take that on in an honest way. Like, lots of people are immediately trying to defend their position in those circumstances. Like, so kudos to him for being open-minded enough to take in what he was seeing with his eyes, right? Because part of the argument is that you can't believe what you see these days, right? This idea that like, oh yeah, the damage that's being done is invisible now, but you'll see it later, kind of thing. And all that kind of nonsense are making people distrust their eyes. So I think that's a awesome story. Wonderful that he was able to kind of go, this is not jiving with what I'm seeing now. And that's important, right?
Yeah. It's a little bit like the movie The Village. I don't know if you've even seen it, but this is like this fabricated artificial community that is set in like the 1600s and has a big kind of wall around it. And they say there's a monster in the woods. Like, don't go into the woods. There's a monster in there. They will eat you. And there's a village of a couple of hundred people. And a girl escapes one day, and she's then exposed to modern day civilization. And she then goes, oh, everything I know wasn't as it seems. Now I've got to start again. I think that can happen on smaller scales and bigger scales. But I digress, and we'll move on.
Those are good digressions, though. I like them.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm interested in this one. I think we've spoken about it before. A lot of the people I work with and network with, dog trainers, that are slowly losing the use of tools. And so conceptually, what do we need to be aware of if we're looking to improve things? I won't use the word proof, but improve things and to increase our potency and reliability of things like recall. So I'm referring to the e-collar here, and if one were not to be allowed to utilize an e-collar, what's our best bet, Michael?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality, right, that we all have to confront. And so although we're arguing against the removal of the use of these tools, and I think the electronic collar has the potential to be the least damaging tool to kind of really reliably kind of finish a recall in the end, right? It has so many things to recommend it that are difficult or potentially harder on the dog than its lack of use, right? But there is a little bit of a silver lining not a silver lining. Let's say there's a little bit of an upside to this, is that as dog trainers, the reality is these tools are going to be taken away in certain arenas. Certain places are going to ban them, right? And they won't be able to use them. They already are in multiple European countries and different places. And so there will be places where they can't. And those people are going to be forced to be more creative about how they do it. Yes, this tool would make that easier, maybe even less stressful for the dog in the end to get the same results, right? And but it forces us to think about problems that we considered settled again. Like, okay, I know progression to use this tool appropriately, and I know I can get through this work and it'll be the best thing for the dog. But now we have to think about it differently. I think there's going to be a return to kind of old school methodology, in a sense, that you're going to have to use lines and things like that, married with good modern dog training principles, meaning you're going to have to be smarter about the management of the dogs during the early stages of training, right? And you're going to have to, while you're developing the reward-based end of the recall work, let's take the recall, for example, and an electronic collar, we'll just use that as our discussion point, is you're going to have to do a better job of the foundation stuff, and you're going to have to manage the dog more carefully through the early parts of its life because you won't have a real recall for a longer period of time because of that. And that means you have to be more careful about the situations you put the dog in and all those kinds of things. And then with our communication tools of like proper marker training and stuff like that, coupled with some traditional methodologies like long line work and stuff like that, I think it's still possible to get dogs there. And certainly dogs did get there before that, right? Before we were using electronic collars a lot. And so, but I think we're going to take some of those things away from ourselves that are going to make that work harder and a longer process. And the mistakes may be a little harder on the dog when we're using mechanical tools like lines and stuff like that, which are necessary if you're not using an electronic collar to truly finish a recall, what you or I would call a real recall. Then the mistakes are a little harder on the dogs than they need to be because of the mechanical aspects of that, right? But I think it'll be a combination of return to some traditional tools that we've used for longer periods of time, and then a lot more emphasis on foundation work and management, and not putting dogs in the wrong situation until you're ready and they're controllable. The electronic collar gives us a lot of freedom, right? And so once I've introduced it, it allows me to put the dog in more realistic situations sooner and help them through that process if I'm doing it properly. So it's unfortunate, but it will drive innovation on dog training as well. People will start to try to find other ways to do this stuff, and we have more information than we did in the past. And so I'm confident that we'll find ways to get some dogs there or most dogs there. But it's like doing it with one hand tied behind your back, right? You're like, so I think as much as possible, we should try to prevent that from happening, or we can prevent it. And in places where the tools are not in danger of being banned, like some of the places in the States and stuff like that, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we're showing very good work with those tools that can be then used to combat the bans. But aside from that, I think that's the basis of what's going to be necessary to get through it without those tools, right? And I think long term, it's going to affect the kind of dog that is acceptable in society or being. And I know friends in law enforcement in some of the European countries that have banned it, and they've had to take certain dogs off the street and things like that, for sure. And their breeding programs, et cetera, have changed as a result of the changes in tool use and methodology, because you're going to need a different kind of dog. There's a certain kind of dog that you're going to have a very, very difficult time making them reliable without that tool. Dogs that those tools have allowed us to work with productively, and those dogs won't be able to be worked with productively. So they'll be removed from the gene pool or euthanized or other things like that. There'll be more euthanasia cases and stuff like that, certainly, I think, because a certain type of dog it's the only thing between them and death, as it were, right?
Yeah. A couple of things you said there that have brought about a couple of points. So you mentioned that as and when tools inevitably, it looks like they'll be banned, hopefully it'll drive innovation in dog training. However, the problem I see that may happen, it will drive one or two things will happen. I think it'll either kind of make us kind of go back in time and start, going back to Keeler style, or it'll drive people to better understand reward-based training. But unfortunately, the people who will receive the traffic there and will be driven to are the people that don't really understand reward-based training that well, because of someone like yourself that does understand reward-based training. Unfortunately, you're an e-collar category. You're now a no-no. And the traffic's going to get driven to people that are reward-based. But you and I both know the average trainer that advocates for reward-based training has a very poor understanding of marker use. And not all of them, by any means. But
yeah. And motivation development and all that kind of stuff. I think you're exactly right. Yeah. They're not good at manipulating motivation. Yeah. That is a concern. It's a deep concern in that work. The other thing is, it will, like, traditionally, I liken it to, like, okay, so people that like herding trainers that in the UK that train border collies, right, to do really incredible control at great distances, right? So one, they look for a very specific kind of dog. And this was true in the hunting dog community before the use of electronic collars as well. They look for a very specific kind of dog, right? And then their yard work had to carry over to those other situations, which meant in the yard, your preparation work or foundation work had to carry over. They had to put pressure on those dogs young in a kind of very traditional way. And it was frequently free of tools. You know, they grabbed them by the ear and said, get over here, kind of thing, right? And they were, or while they had check lines on them and stuff like that in there, and they had to do it intensely enough to make an impression that lasted when you put it out at a distance and in higher states of arousal around livestock or hunting stuff and things like that. And that's the kind of traditional methodologies that if you're going to be successful, you'll have to rise to the occasion, because we know that even if you're the best reward-based trainer in the world, there are limits to that. You're going to run up against them, right? And there will be certain situations you can't put your dog in because you don't have a fully fleshed out recall. Yeah. There's the recall when the dog is recalling because it wants to get something from you. And if I do a good enough job with that, that can become pretty habitual. But that dog gets really engaged in something that it wants, and it's going to break down at some point, right? So there'll be a limit to that for almost all dogs, except for a rare kind of dog that's just easy and very motivated. But for many, many dogs, there'll be a limit to that work, right? And so, and we know that, and good balance training is finding the way to motivate the dogs from both sides of the equation. And so I fear a little bit of a return to those methodologies, right? The ones that we had before that, where trainers used to use a check cord, their hands and their feet. They shot dogs with slingshots and stuff like that. Like, because at some point you need to make an impression that's going to carry into these other situations. And what the electronic collar allows us to do is to kind of fine tune the level that's necessary and transfer it to those situations in an incremental way, which is much easier on the dog, right? For sure. And that other kind of work, you think the way modern training takes finesse, the people that were good at that, the traditional work, talk about finesse. That is definitely not transferable to the dog training community at large. I have a number of friends that were what we would consider now very skilled old school dog trainers, and they got incredible results from dogs because they had such a fine feel for that work. But you want to talk about a difficult skill to transfer to new trainers, and all the dogs that have to suffer to learn that skill, it's very, very challenging. And so, and those people were good at it, and there are people out there that are good at it, but it's not widely consumable for the dog training public at all. And that's one of the things that I feel about the electronic collar. It's an egalitarian tool. It's a democratic tool. Like somebody in a wheelchair can use this tool. Somebody with arthritis can use this tool, right? And things like that. And there are most of the dog training traditions wouldn't allow that to happen. Like there's no chance. You had to have a certain set of physical skills in order to have that happen. And we can adjust it to a wide variety of dogs in a very controlled way. So it's highly lamentable if that's being banned in certain places, because I think it's better for dogs than all the other alternatives are, right? But it's the reality in certain places for sure.
I've got a client with a black Labrador, and unfortunately, his name's Tim. He took a fall off a ladder 20 years ago, and he lost the use of both his legs, and he has very limited use of his hands. So really awful. And I'll shout out to Tim in that you will never meet anyone in your life with a better attitude and outlook on life than this man, right? And bear in mind, he has limited use of every one of his limbs. And he has this black Labrador. And to this day, I always say the same thing. He's the most impressive graduate that we've ever had through our school. Like, this dog will find his keys, put them on his lap. He'll open his van. He will turn the lights on and off in his van. This dog is to work is like the most amazing thing you've ever seen. And kudos to Tim in every way. Before we started working with him, he did a pretty good job. But young black Labrador, 10 months old, his excitement gets the better of him. Strong working stock dog. And so we overlaid the e-collar just to tidy things up, to give him that reliability and surety, right? And of course, it was life-changing for him. The dog will heel next to his chair. He can take the dog anywhere. He'll switch sides. He'll come back every time. He'll hold it downstairs, as well as all the amazing stuff he can do. And I'll get videos popped up here as I'm talking about him, because it truly is like impressive. And he took the dog to a kennel club, like a tracking. It wasn't tracking. It was scent work. Yeah, sorry. Mm-hmm. And they said, you can't use an e-collar. You can't use an e-collar. And he went there 3 times. The dog realized that, hey, Dad might not have any control of me in this situation, because he was getting there, stripped of the tool. And they said, you can't come back because you haven't got enough control of the dog.
Criminal,
right? And you're taking away from this guy, his dog, and everything in between, and undermining all the amazing work he's done, and the dog wearing the tools. Like, the best thing about it is, and we always like to see this, is his attitude. The tail's high, it's wagging, he's got the soft mouth, and there's nothing indicative that anything that happened in there is untowards the dog. And it doesn't make sense, the argument.
I honestly think that like, those are the profiles that we need to collect to put out in the world. Like, the average person doesn't have any conception of what the tool is, right? And so, and many of the people that are railing against it have no actual real conception of what the tool is and how it can be used and how it can improve dogs and human beings' lives in that way. And those are the kind of success stories that we want front and center, right, in the thing. So, and it's absolutely criminal that there aren't organizations out there that would allow him to do scent work with the collar. It's just stupid, right? So this is something maybe call to the dog training community as large. Let's have a tool friendly organizations that are starting to make it okay to have those things in the picture and allow the dogs to do things, because that's all we all want, is for dogs to be able to do stuff. I mean, how much time and money do we invest and energy do we invest in getting the average person to just do some stuff with your dog, right? Your dog's life's better, your life's better, they're easier to live with, everything, just do some stuff. And then we say, oh, we limit it. Like, you can't do this, you can't do that. Like, come on, let's make this inclusive, like, in some fashion. So maybe this will be a siren call to get people to start a scent work club where your dogs can have tools on.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully. I don't know whether this is the case across sports. I'm sure it'll be the case of like AKC obedience, no?
Oh yeah.
And anything under the kennel club, agility and so on. And
we had a big thing here in the AKC. They had a big thing where they made a position statement against the electronic collar, and then but the hunting community in the AKC is huge. The Labrador hunt trial community is huge, and they lost their mind, and so they backed off of it. But you still can't have those tools on event grounds. Any AKC event, the dogs can't have collars on them at events or on the event grounds during the things and that sort of thing. And people do workarounds on it and stuff, but you can't, none of the tools are there, which is, it's a problem, right? There's a difference between, okay, I'm in a competition, I'm testing my training and my dog can't be wearing equipment during a competition kind of thing, versus whether or not the dogs can be wearing those tools in training and in club training and stuff like that. I don't think AKC has a blanket prohibition against using those tools in the training process because they got too much of an uproar from it. But you can't have them around competitions and around trial grounds and things like that. It's unfortunate. And we need new organizations that would sanction. Maybe they're not so strict about the competition end of it, and just for people that want to do stuff like nose work. How is an electronic collar wouldn't even be affecting your dog's nose work or detection work? Yeah. Like, you're not using it in detection. You're using it potentially to control the dog around stuff. And so there would be no reason to say that a dog in a detection circumstance couldn't be wearing a collar. That's silly, right? It has it in no way influences the dog's scenting ability, right? As opposed to like obedience, you could say, okay, yeah, right. There's potentially for an obedience competition, the dog should be able to wear that collar, right? But yeah,
it's unfortunate that I think this conversation we're having now will be preaching to the choir. People that will be listening to this will already kind of on that side of things. What do you think we can do to kind of send this sort of message to a wider audience? Because if that's who we need to be speaking to, because unfortunately the people that are rallying against them, they have profiles that do speak to a wider audience because of their superficial message, I think, appeals to the wider audience that maybe is limited on their education or understanding of the dog training as a whole, industry as a whole, right? Yeah. Like my mum, for example, is the person I think about when I think, how do I speak to a wider audience? I always think, right, when I create content, I need to create it so my mum will understand, because if showing her an e-collar, she's like, oh my God, mind explodes. Can't believe you do that. Bloody, bloody, blah, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So I think a combination of creating content for those people, showing many happy, nice working dogs that are enjoying their lives and doing things with the tools in place, right? So that there are visuals for people to say, like, look, your friend Simon was his name, I think, that came and watched training and saw stuff and saw you interact with your dog. So I think the more they're in the picture with dogs behaving joyfully, doing their things, and recognizing that they're not all traumatic and it's not damaging to the dog, so for that thing, and then ways in which we can explain how they work and that kind of stuff. And then I think combinations of like the panels that that Joe Rosie did when we were on one of the first kind of talk thing, where we try to find people from different camps with different ideas and sit down and have a conversation, like a respectful conversation where everybody gets to kind of talk about their point of view. And I think that opens minds on both sides of the fence a little bit, and it helps you kind of recognize what people's hangups are about them and that kind of thing, which will make it easier for us to address that going forward, right? What's the biggest concern, right? Somebody that doesn't, because you get face to face with a lot of the people that are advocating against e-collar use, and they'll start to say things like, well, yeah, for these really skilled trainers that know what they're doing, then see this thing, but for the average person, they're not going to do that. And that becomes the argument. So then now we need to put our energy towards education and recognizing that, hey, it's not as complicated as you think it is. And the average person can, with a minimal amount of education, still use the tool safely and effectively and humanely and everything else. Right. And so I think kind of promoting more of those kinds of discussions will be useful, not only as keeping a dialogue open, but also as directing us towards where our educational energy should go. Right.
Mm-hmm. I think reframing it, the big thing for me is always reframing the tools as something that's enabling, not disabling, in that more often than not, trainers like you and I, we're utilizing tools to allow the dog to do more, not to get him to do less, right? And I think the common rhetoric from the layperson, from that wider audience, is that it's a tool of suppression. And of course, it could be a tool of acute suppression to create opportunity, but the picture in which you need to look at it is something to enable the dog to just do more, have a better life. And where the tool is coming from, or how we're applying it, or for what intended purpose, should I say, is so important to keep reiterating that point. I'm not doing it to make my life easier. Mm-hmm. I'm certainly not doing it so my dog's going to hold a longer down stay or never break the fucking heel position. I'm doing it so the dog can live a life that's more akin to the life he's designed to have.
Yep.
Which is to liberate us, right?
Yeah, more freedom. Where you can take them hiking, let them off, let them run, let them be dogs. Like, yeah, I think that's a misconception too. I think you touched on something there that's really important. That the idea that generally speaking, better dog trainers outside of the early foundation stages of training give their dogs a lot more freedom. Like, I control my dogs much less around my house and in day-to-day life than the average dog owner does or tries to do. Like, they got lots of freedom to be dogs. Like they're not waiting it outdoors when they're going outside and all that stuff. You know, I get up in the morning and turn on the espresso machine, throw the door open, and they blast out and tear around the yard, and they do all their dog stuff, right? And that's possible because of the control that I can allow that, because I know I can rein things in if I start to have problems, or I can see problems coming and head them off. And so I don't have to have the dog under my thumb all the time. And they get a much higher quality of life. Not only can I take them places and let them off and let them run and all that kind of stuff, and I can control them around other dogs and things in a way that allows them to have a fuller life, but on a day-to-day basis, I don't have to control them as much either, right? Which I think that's the antithesis of what people think it is. People think it's the other way. Oh, you guys are just like little military controlling every action. Like, your dog has to be under your thumb at all times. It's like, no, like, I want the opposite. I want my dog to do dog things with full abandon. And if I'm going to allow that, and people that aren't training using these tools and things like that, what ends up happening is they have to stay on top of the dog, because if the dog hits a certain level of excitement, they don't have them anymore. Right. And so then they require that everything is structured, everything is regimented, always controlled, always keeping the dog below a certain level of excitement. And that's how they navigate that world, which is super unfortunate for the dog. Right.
I think that's so important to remember that. And this could be misinterpreted, but the less you're able to tell the dog to fucking, like, don't do that, the more management is required. And
exactly right.
There's a common misconception that there's a correlation between dog trainers that use punishment and then like hyper management, in terms of, like you said, we have some militant, and it's quite literally the opposite. The reason I use punishment is to enable the dog to do a plethora of other things, not to then constantly micromanage in everyday life. But just like you've said, if you don't have the ability to tell a dog to avoid something, to actively avoid a behavior or a stimuli, then of course you're going to need much, much more management, which will then retract from the dog's everyday life or the dog's welfare, you might argue.
I would strongly argue that it negatively impacts their welfare. I think you're exactly right.
A dog that can't be trusted not to counter surf has to be on a place bed or in a crate, right? they're going to have much, much less freedom. But if you say to the dog, you're not allowed to do that, and you can pick anything else, of course, they're going to have much more freedom. And I think that's really important to remember when we're weighing up kind of methodologies, let's say, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Michael, I feel like that's a really good place to wrap up. Now, I know you're too humble of a guy to ever give yourself a plug, but whenever anyone asks me where's a really good resource for dog training knowledge and to upskill themselves, I always point them to your membership, which I'm actually signed up for. I truly think it is by far the best value for money in terms of what you get in there. And so anyone listening to this today, I'd highly recommend they go over there, sign up, and I'm always dipping my toe in and out and learning from yourself. So thank you for that. Thank you for making it so readily available for people. I know you're not a social media guy, and you most certainly don't like a camera following you around 24/7 like I do. But thank you very much. And of course, thank you today for your time. I look forward to meeting you in person. If you had told me 9 years ago when I first started watching your YouTube channel religiously that I'd have an opportunity to come and see you and deliver at your school, I would never have believed you. So a third thank you for that opportunity. And just thanks again, man.
Thank you, man. It's been my pleasure. And thank you for that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you this summer. We're going to have a good time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael.
Take care. Thanks.